Very nice.
Landon, your brother, right here. You want to be right here, is that all right?
Okay.
I know this is Catherine here, she's probably there. Joelle, why don't we put you in front? All right, why don't we put you two over here? Joelle, why don't you stand to the other side? And you two, whatever spot you want, is just fine. Is everybody ready? Yes. Thank you all for being here. We are here to discuss three very important cases. You guys getting on anything? I'm sorry, do you need a second?
I'm sorry.
No problem. All right, start over. Thank you all for being here. We are here to discuss three very important cases. Let me identify for you some of the individuals who are here with me. First of all, we have Special Investigations Unit Supervisor ADA Leandra Retaco. That's Lyandra. Retaco is Retacco, who will do most of the talking during this conference. We have with us Tyrell Brown, that's Tyrell Brown, who is the Interim Executive Director of GALEI, G-A-L-A-E-I. He is they are a sexual assault survivor, and also the organization itself is an LGBTQ social justice organization, and that is spelled G-A-L-A-E-I. We have, in addition, Captain Margot Aline Parker, who, as of about a month ago, became the chief of the Philadelphia Police Department's Special Victims Unit. And my understanding, please correct me if I misspell it, but my understanding is her name is M-A-R-G-O, and the last name is A-L-L-E-Y-N-E-Parker, spelled the usual way. We have, in addition, some of the attorneys and other DAO staff who work diligently on these kinds of cases. We have SIU ADA Joshua Barnett, spelled as you might expect. We have SIU ADA Vincent Corrigan, spelled as you might expect. And we also have one of my favorite people in this office, Kelly Burkhart, who is with us, hiding in the back. We are here to discuss something that is, in fact, extremely serious. The issues involved here have to do with the sexual assault, sexual violation of people by law enforcement officers, some of them juveniles, at least one of them an adult, that occurred either on or off duty in 3 different cases. It is, in fact, a situation that reminds us somewhat of what happened with Philip Nordo, when a system that is supposed to be even-handed and hold everyone accountable failed to do that. But I am glad to report that every good and hard-working Philadelphia police officer who uses their power in ways that are appropriate is being lifted up today, because a few of those who use their power in completely inappropriate ways are being knocked down. And that is exactly as it should be in a system that is just and that believes in even-handed accountability. I will have ADA Retaco up here in just one second, but I want to mention now and mention later that there may be people who see this conference and who have information in relation to these cases. Whatever truthful information you have, whoever it helps or hurts, we want to hear it. And so the DAO Special Investigations Unit can be reached at 215-686-9608. While that number is not going to be answered 24/7, it is going to be answered during business hours. Every message is going to be scrutinized the next morning. Calls are going to be returned. SIU can also be reached at siu@phila.gov, which is the usual, the usual format for emails for the DA's office. It is my pleasure at this time to call forth ADA Leandra Retaco to explain many of the details. She will be calling up others who will have some things to say. At the end, I'll come back up and I will mediate the Q&A session. We are going to take questions and we are going to provide answers in relation to these cases. Thank you very much. ADA Ritacco.
Good afternoon. I'd like first to, again, echo the district attorney and thank Captain Margot Aline Parker for being here, the captain of the Special Victims Unit. Although we are talking about really abuses of power today, I will note that the Special Victims Unit at the Police Department has assisted in all of these investigations in some way, shape, or form, and we are very pleased to have their partnership. We have been working closely with them on many of these cases. I'm going to talk about 3 cases today. I'm first going to talk about Commonwealth v. Howard Rubin. I understand that that case has been covered to some extent by the media in Philadelphia. Nonetheless, there are some details that I would like to share about the length of what we know in that investigation because it is so important for the victims and for anyone who has information about any of these, but particularly on this case, to please come forward, even if whether your intention is to prosecute or whether you just need help. This is something that, frankly, was a shocking failure of many systems all at once. Howard Rubin, on January 31st of 2020, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania arrested the former school police resource officer who was for the school district and charged him with various sexual offenses, corruption of minors, and falsification offenses. On February 9th of 2023, following a guilty plea, defendant Rubin was guilty plea to 4 of those charges. Defendant Rubin was sentenced to an aggregate sentence of 10 to 20 years of incarceration, followed by a period of probation by the Honorable Monica Gibbs. Specifically, defendant Rubin pled to 2 different sex assault charges involving 2 different complaining witnesses, a falsification of official information and lying to police, in addition to corruption of the morals of a minor. We have, as I mentioned, good reason to believe that there are other victims of this defendant out there, and we urge you or anyone who has information to come forward. What we know for sure is that in 2008, defendant Rubin worked for the Philadelphia School District, specifically at Edison High School. He was subsequently transferred to Mastbaum High School. In 2010, defendant Rubin's employment was terminated by the school district because of inappropriate contact with children who he met during the course of his employment. By 2011, defendant Rubin was working as a resource officer for the Multicultural Academy Charter School, MCA. By 2014, defendant Rubin was separated from MCA for fraternizing inappropriately with children outside of school. Defendant Rubin then continued his work as a security guard, which he had been maintaining throughout his time as a school resource officer. During that time, he had access to a number of guns. There are at least 2 occasions where defendant Rubin has claimed that those guns were stolen by people who he had interactions with as a result of these connections. Defendant Rubin had a public Facebook presence and social media presence calling himself the Philly Hip Hop Cop. That page and those contacts were maintained as recently as August of 2019. He was known very well at different nonprofit organizations and sporting after-school places where he would volunteer his time and effort as a mentor and as a security guard, once again armed, at those places where children would gather. Based on our investigation, we believe that there are other victims that are out there of defendant Rubin, and we are asking you to come forward. And I'm going to take a moment here, and I'm going to ask Tyrell Brown, who's very courageously agreed to join us here, to talk a little bit about the kind of services that those children or former children, young people, would be able to take advantage of and what his experience is.
Thank you. This is hard. I didn't think it was going to be this hard, but I'm Tyrell Brown. I'm the interim executive director at Galay. We're a social justice organization located in Kensington. What is surviving sexual assault? I think it's surviving, for me, it was surviving the depression, the shame, the danger, and years of anxiety that complicated my entire life. It complicates everybody's lives, and sometimes, unfortunately, it ends people's lives. Almost ended mine. And when I was asked to come here to share a few words, I initially felt great. I was like, yeah, I get to share my story. It's going to be powerful, right? And then all the self-doubt started to creep in, and worrying about if people would care at all, if people would believe me, if people would look at me differently, don't want us to be seen as a punk or weak. And also the fear that friends and neighbors and family would suddenly blame themselves, or even worse, blame me and excuse it all over again. So pretty much all the same conversations that I experienced right away when I first initially experienced being raped. So I wanted to pivot immediately to being safe and small, and trying to equate staying small with being safe. But I learned from decades of first ignoring my sexual assault, shaming myself, and then lying to myself and playing it off, that staying small never kept me safe. I learned that this was for them, the person who sexually assaulted me, it was about domination, coercion, manipulation, and flat out abuse. And I shamed myself for years because our society teaches people like me, teaches men especially, that being vulnerable makes you weak. I shamed myself because I didn't get back up right away after this happened to me, and in fact, I kept myself down. I beat myself up for years. But today, because I acknowledged what happened to me first, because I shared with people that I could trust, I can now care about myself better, and I can teach people to care about me in the right way. So today and every day, I'm able to share my truth and encourage others to do the same, because that's how we eradicate a culture that accepts sexual assault. 15 years ago, I was assaulted by a popular restaurant owner. He's still around. I still see him around. And he took advantage of my ignorance, my youth, my vulnerability, to manipulate me and put me in a place where I felt I didn't have any power. Then he raped me. I felt so unsure afterwards that I decided to cover it up as just a date, like we went on a date. And it was fun, or even worse, the worst part was like I deserved it. And no one deserves that. Like, just no one deserves it. No one deserves to have their innocence stolen. And it left a stain on my life that I still recognize and still comes up, as I explained before. But I'm here because I'm surviving. I'm a proud survivor every day. Less and less I think about it, but sometimes it pops up, but I'm still surviving. I have neighbors and friends that are around me every day. They don't know what's happening. I'm like worrying about whether or not they're going to think differently of me. But I think more importantly, I think it's going to allow them to open up their arms and really open up their ears and eyes and be cognizant of other people that are surviving within their networks, family, and sometimes within their homes. In part, I came forward because there's other people that were leaders that have bravely come out and spoken out before me, and we're trying to create a culture where that's the thing to do. But I think more than that, it was because I took a risk for myself. I woke up one morning in 2020 and I was so angry and I didn't know why. And I kept asking myself why I was so angry. And I got my answer. And I just knew that I didn't want to be angry anymore. And the only way to not be the way that I was, to be defensive and angry, was to tell the truth about what happened to me. So I shared with my partner, and I shared with my mom. I shared with other people who then started telling me that they were sexually assaulted too. So the dominoes really fell out in a powerful way to really build networking and community, which I'm hoping that this will do today. And also, I think more than anything, we know that this world today things are tough all over, but like resilience is key, and it just keeps us going. So, as was said before, I think we're asking people to stand up for themselves, but also, this person has already been sentenced. This is about getting resources into the hands of people that desperately need them to get the help that they deserve, to get the care that they deserve, so that they can care about themselves, their families, their children in some cases, in ways that they weren't cared for themselves. And we can build that in and teach each other how to care about each other. So please consider reaching out, and know that if you ever question whether or not it was sexual assault, then that's already an indication that you didn't give consent for what happened. I also have so much gratitude for all the survivors out there, and those who are outspoken, but also for those that are silent survivors, who are going about their day, and just know that together we don't have to be silent anymore if we stand together. Thank you.
The next two cases I'm going to be talking about are both open cases that are being prosecuted. Arrests have been effectuated. However, because they are open investigations, there is going to be less detail that I am going to give than about the case that has already been closed. So just please be mindful of that. I should note that the picture that is up on the screen right now is of Defendant Rubin. That is his mugshot. Part of the reason that we are doing that under these circumstances, which is a change from our normal standard operating procedure, is because it is under these circumstances with these cases, in the way that they unfolded, we believe that it is so important to reach out to the community so that people can see, make connections, and be able to identify any additional information or help that they may need, either from the District Attorney's Office or from SVU or from any other organization, community organization that is out there for that help. So, the next case I'm going to be talking about is Commonwealth v. Patrick Heron, H-E-R-O-N. Mr. Heron, Defendant Heron, was arrested first on 4/18 of 2022 for stalking, retaliation, and harassment. He was subsequently arrested on September 28th of 2022 and charged with 22 counts relating to this behavior, referring to this ongoing investigation. Those counts include unlawful contact with a minor, graded as an F2, intimidation of a witness, graded as an F1, several charges of child pornography, forgery, graded as an F2, obstruction of an investigation, indecent assault of someone less than 13 years of age, and several counts of corruption of the morals of a minor. That case is already proceeding to court and is scheduled for trial in the next 6 months. I will note, however, that this person, Defendant Heron, was a retired police officer. He did retire in 2019. Through the course of our investigation, we have good faith basis and reason to believe that there are people who have information about this defendant, including the time when he was on the force. His picture is up on the screen now. We're asking the public to come forward with any information about Defendant Herron, including when he was on the police force for the years preceding 2019. He was in uniform and in patrol. And then finally, we have former homicide detective Donald Soshinsky. Defendant Soshinsky was charged on February 23rd of 2023 with harassment, aggravated indecent assault as a felony of the second degree, indecent assault, a misdemeanor of the first degree, indecent assault, misdemeanor of the second degree, stalking, official oppression, and criminal use of a communication facility. Defendant Soshinsky's picture is currently on the screen. I will note that the charges and the behavior for which former Detective Soshinsky was charged concern his conduct on duty in and around November of 2020. Additionally, those charges relate to individuals that he met in the course of his duties as a homicide detective. I'm going to say that again. He met those charges relate to individuals that he met in the course of his duties as a homicide detective. Again, anyone with information relating to this defendant or any of the other defendants, please reach out to SVU or Special Investigations. All of the information that we receive will be responded to in as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much to SIU Chief Leandra Rataco, and also I just want to express my gratitude to Terrell Brown. Hard thing to do, but he did it. Okay, so let me just speak about a couple things quickly, and then we'll go to questions and answers. I have a list, as far as I know, of all the journalists who are here, and I will certainly go through it. If I miss anybody, just tell me. We will not quit until we've made sure that all journalists who have here have had an opportunity to inquire about matters that are of importance to them. So in general, the DA's office has had a policy for a long time of not routinely publishing arrest photos and other photographs of defendants, and there are a lot of good reasons to do that, but there are also a few good reasons to use those photos. One of those good reasons is for identification purposes, and so we have used arrest photos in that context and other photos in that context in the past, and we are doing it here. And we are doing it here because we are aware that for people who are potential witnesses or even maybe survivors or victims of this conduct, they may not know a name, but they may know a face, or they may be able, even with a photograph taken years after their contact or the information that they witnessed, they may be able to understand their connection to this case. These photographs will be provided to media electronically for your use, and that will occur with our press release shortly after we conclude what it is we have to do here. I understand that there will be some questioning in Spanish, and I can do that from the podium, but I'm going to call on that journalist toward the end just for logistical reasons. All right, let me start in the order they are written, and no preference expressed. CBS 3, we have Matt Petrillo. Mr. Petrillo?
So each of these defendants, you think there might be more victims out there?
Ms. Rataco, would you care to answer that?
Based on our investigation, in all three instances, District Attorney's Office has a good faith belief that there are people with information who we are asking to share with authorities, us or the police department. Some of those people may include victims, but we have, what we are looking for is truthful information from anyone who this may jog.
And the last defendant, is he accused of raping the mother of a murder victim? If you can go into what happened in that situation, and then Haran assaulting young girls, if you could be a little more specific to those details.
I understand the question, but given that these are both open prosecutions, I don't think that there's any additional information that I can comment on that's not already part of the public filings.
But that's accurate, though?
I would point you to the public filings.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Johansson from KYW.
Two questions. One, are you guys just basically holding this press conference to ask for more from other people who may have been affected or assaulted?
Well, that
What we knew about the,
that is certainly part of the purpose, but I'm going to let ADA Rotako answer further if she wants. Do you have more to say on that? Or?
I mean, I can comment on that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to answer it. Yes.
it's fine.
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, that's the answer as to why we're here. What I can say is that it is based on our investigation, not all of the details which I would share under these circumstances, given the nature of at least two of them being open investigations and being mindful of potential victims and people who are survivors of these kinds of assaults. But yes, my goal here is to say I have good faith basis in all three of these cases that there may be people with information that we are asking to come forward.
Both for you and then also for our survivor. It's, I would say generally people would imagine or think that it may be easy to, or there's, I guess, some in society, why didn't you just go forward? Why didn't you just come forward? Can you both maybe speak on that, about how, or to the people who may be potential victims, what do you say to them to maybe make them make that step to make law?
Thank you for that question. And I will say not just, and victims and survivors. I want to use both of those appropriately, and just people with information. That is really what we are looking for here. We're turning to the community, to Philadelphians, so that if there's things that people know, that we can get as clear of a picture as we can of what kind of harm was done in the community. But I think you're absolutely right that there are all sorts of concerns when victims don't come forward. I think Mr. Brown spoke really eloquently about that, and I'll leave a lot of that conversation to him. But I'll note that our goal here is to try to support the people who have been hurt by these actions and by, frankly, the color of authority that was twisted in all three of these cases to be able to get access to people for that situation. That's how they all wound up with the Special Investigations Unit. So, but yes, that is why we are doing this, and that is why we are putting this forward, in order also to try to indicate to Philadelphians that this is something that we're taking seriously, that this is something that we want information on, whatever that information may be, as long as it's truthful. And then we're going to get to be able to support the community in whatever way we can.
So, excuse me, I also want to say the reason why I use the word silent survivor is because that's victimization isn't powerful language that encourages people to come out and to share their stories. And I think what we're here for is to make sure that people can acknowledge that there's a valve out there, that they can get assistance, they can get help, and they can get resources. It's not hard, it's not easy, which is why I did acknowledge that, like, it was a risk. Like, even just acknowledging it to myself was a risk, like, that I had to take to really tell the truth to myself, and then also to share that with my partner, to share that with my mother, to share that with other friends, and then even people in community in general, and then also, of course, to come here on this platform to do it as well. Not everyone's going to take it seriously. Not everyone's going to validate or support, but you can't be silent, because then you'll die in silence. Like, there's someone out there that is going to help you. There's someone out there, I think I read a quote the other day that it's like you haven't met all the people in the world that are going to love you yet. And I'm 40 years old, and I haven't met all the people in the world that are going to love me yet. And if I don't tell the truth about the things that I've experienced, then I will never get to find those people that are going to value and support me and love me and care about me in the ways that I deserve.
I would simply add to those comments, obviously nearly all crimes are generally considered to be underreported, meaning there's a difference between the number of crimes that occur and the number that are brought to the attention of law enforcement. I think it is generally agreed that all types of sexual assault, domestic violence are among those that are most underreported. So certainly part of the larger context of what's happening here is when you look at what Reuben did and you look at how he did it, you look at his placing himself in positions where he could groom young people, where he could mentor, he claimed, but actually groom young people, it is reasonable to conclude based upon that there may be more people who were affected by his conduct. This is a man who is so blatant that when he went to his sentencing, he stood up at his sentencing and asked for probation so that he could mentor more youth. That's something. That tells you something about the mentality that we see when it comes to people who are serial killers, serial rapists. When it comes to these kinds of folks, what you're dealing with is a rationalization and a mentality that has great potential to embolden them to keep doing the same kinds of illegal conduct. Fox 29, Kelly Rule.
Specifically with Detective Shinsky, do you have any, I'm sure this is part of the investigation, but anything you can say about him using his official government-issued email to speak with some of his victims?
Let me check with ADA Bertacco to see if we can add more. Okay. So I don't have more information on that for you right now, and there's a good reason for it, but I would note that he's actually not a detective anymore. He has been fired. He is no longer a detective. The reason, as much as I would enjoy having the opportunity to inform the public more about the details here, the fact is when we come forward and we're looking for people with information, we have to preserve the integrity of that process by not putting too many details out there that would over-inform potential witnesses who are coming forward. And let's understand, what we are looking for here is the truth. The truth, wherever it points, is what we are looking for in relation to these cases. Did you have another question?
I guess if there's any concerns that were the case, that people might have known that this behavior was going on, or even if you could speak to the fact that he clearly thought through his power he would be able to get away with these alleged crimes.
ADA Bertacco, do you want to say anything? Or would you rather I handle it? Okay. The history of criminal activity is often a history of abusing people who are in a somewhat marginalized position or people who are in a lower status in society. No surprise then that the most prolific serial killer of all time mostly was killing sex workers. No surprise that pattern has repeated itself all over the world and in Philadelphia with people who set about strangling sex workers. They also often include people who are poor. They include people who are LGBTQ and are marginalized as a consequence. They include women who have been marginalized for ever. That's how it works. And when you have people who are given a particular status in society, whether that is through wealth or that is through their job, whatever it may be, sadly, the ones who are most inclined to commit those crimes are placed in a position where their word is considered more reliable, where people may be afraid to even come forward to say anything about it. If your question is, was there an abuse of power here? Hell yeah, there was an abuse of power here. Hell yeah, being able to say I'm officer so-and-so, or driving a patrol car, or having a uniform, all of that created part of the matrix that made it more possible to commit the crimes and more possible to get away with them. It is not an overstatement to say that historically, in the past, the Philadelphia DA's office has at times been involved in looking the other way or covering this up. And certainly not the captain who's here today, but elements in the PPD have in the past, certainly at times, been involved in looking the other way or covering up. Are there any other questions, Kelly, Ms. Rule?
Wow, so as a civil suit in this case, did that help expedite, involving this defendant, I should say, did that help expedite things?
No, I mean, yes, I can answer. No, the investigation proceeded along its course in close connection with the PPD, and the charges resulted when they resulted.
Okay. Maggie Kent, ABC.
Yes. Two questions. My first one being that because Shasinski was a former homicide detective, are there any concerns about the cases that were prosecuted with his investigative work?
Do you want to answer that? Let me just say this. It's, you know, it's always concerning when you have a detective who is alleged to have committed crimes, but I think it's premature to answer that. It's certainly, just as it was a concern in the Nordo cases, just as it may be a concern in the Pitts cases, it's certainly a concern, but we're not really in a position to fully answer that yet. Is there any other question?
Yes.
Yeah, may I?
Oh, yes, of course.
Sorry,
Go
there's,
ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear. The Special Investigations Unit, also, the crimes come to us, we get referrals from all sorts of different sources. In fact, all three of these cases came to us through different channels, and we prosecute the cases that are in front of us. As far as those decisions, those happen at a higher level than any of the decisions that are made about that individual prosecution.
Okay. In terms of Rubin, you had mentioned that he had already been sentenced, right?
Yes, that's correct.
But you're asking for more people to come forward.
Yes, that's correct.
Is obviously there an opportunity for there to be more charges brought upon him if somebody else comes forward and says, yes, I was also victimized? Talk to me about that process, because it was kind of like, well, he's sentenced, should I step up?
Understood, and thank you for that question. The answer to that is that as we investigated the Rubin case and we realized how long his relationships in the community that he had, in the case that he pled guilty to, manipulated in order for his own sexual gratification. I don't believe those things, I have a good faith belief that those things did not exist in a vacuum. What I am trying to do here, the reason that I asked the district attorney, the captain of SVU, and Mr. Brown to be here, is that the prosecution for people who that's what they want, I would certainly never tell a survivor that that's not something that we're law enforcement. That is absolutely what the district attorney's office is here for and what we would pursue. I will note, though, that part of why we wanted Mr. Brown to speak is that it is the harm that has already happened. The harm that has already, for the individuals that I believe are out there and are in pain. Acknowledging that this is a thing that happened, this is a prosecution that happened, this is no longer a person in the community, and here's why. I am hopeful that that may give someone the courage to be able to reach out to the district attorney's office, reach out to special victims, or to just get themselves help to be able to address the kinds of injury in all the ways that that causes.
Is there a statute concern here, like a statute of limitations?
To be honest with you, I'm not, that's not my goal here, is really as a public safety issue, and is not about the viability of any additional prosecutions at this stage. You're absolutely right, I won't foreclose that idea, but the reason that I'm having this conversation once again about Defendant Rubin is because I think there's a legitimate safety concern that the District Attorney's Office has to address with the public, and so here we are.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Palmer, Inquirer.
Do you believe there's anyone within the school district or the police department who knew about the actions of any of these three men? And is there any potential criminal consequence for any people in that respect?
So as for part one of your question, I have no comment at this time. As for part two, I think it is somewhat analogous to look at the situation of the prosecution of Monsignor Lin, which concluded fairly recently, as you may recall, through a very long and tortured history. He was not accused of personally placing hands on juvenile victims of sexual assault, but he was accused of administratively moving around sexual predators in a way so that new congregations would be unaware and the pattern of misconduct would not appear. It is the kind of conduct that this office has been willing to prosecute in prior administrations and also in this administration. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Palmer? Okay, thank you. Diana Durante, are you here? Aha.
These were three cases that were publicized already. Did people with information or additional victims come forward then as well?
We have no comment on that at this time, and I'm not trying to be coy, but we have to protect the integrity of the process, and we also have to protect people who may come forward so they do not feel like that's going to be announced in the media. There may come a time in the future when we will say more about it, but not at this time.
So we don't know if this will work. We don't know if us being here then today will help your cause on that. And then if you could summarize the three cases, please, for us in Spanish for our listeners.
En español, ok. Estamos aquí para discutir tres casos de asalto sexual, tres policías distintos cometieron estos crímenes en contra jóvenes en dos casos y una mujer adulta en otro caso. No vamos a aceptar el abuso sexual de la gente de Filadelfia, por eso estamos aquí a explicar la situación. Now that wasn't great, so if you'd like me to do it again, I will. Did that work or no?
Works for me. I don't actually speak Spanish as well as you.
Well, that is fortunate for me. All right, thank you. Deanna, do you have any other questions or no? That's it. Okay, did I miss anybody? Yes, sir.
You didn't miss me. I'm not on the list, but I'm on Channel 10. My name's Jim Friedman. I just have a question, if possible.
Sure.
You used the term systematic failure. Since then, what has been done to prevent it from happening again?
Well, I'm not going to speak for PPD, and I'm not going to speak for the city in general or the school district. I'm sure they may have their own comments about this, but I can tell you one thing that has happened in the DA's offices: we're not having it. We are not going to be part of a cover-up. We are not going to be part of justice that only applies to people who do not have a uniform or do not have a city job or do not have some kind of status. And that's why we're here, because we're actually prosecuting these cases in the same way that we prosecuted the Nordo case. Little reminder on the Nordo case. The Nordo case came to the attention of PPD and this office in 2005, before Nordo ever became a homicide detective. And when it came to the attention of this office and prosecutors in this office, at that time, it came with some pretty compelling, pretty disturbing evidence. Most specifically, that a young man had come out of an interrogation booth and said that Nordo forced him to do sexual things during an interrogation. To its credit, PPD actually sent people in who used a variety of forensics to determine that the young man's semen was actually in that interrogation booth, and that is not usually what happens in interrogation booths. That evidence went to this office and the PPD. And I gotta say, it takes a lot to put your head in the sand on that one. And that is how Nordo became a homicide detective and had more and more and more power over people so that he could commit his serial crimes. He had the ability to try to steer reward money to the wrong people. He had the ability to try to shift blame for the commission of a homicide to the wrong people. He had the ability in many different ways to give gifts or to take things away from people who either did or didn't do exactly what he was demanding. I would say sexually, but it's really more about dominance and power. That's what he had. So we're not doing that. We are not doing that. We don't really care how rich you are, famous you are, powerful you are, what your job is. There has to be even-handed justice, and that is what we're trying to do here. I only wish that had happened back in 2005, and we would not have seen all of the victims, all the survivors of Nordo's conduct, and we would not be looking at a whole pile of homicide cases, the integrity of which we cannot always be sure anymore as a consequence of that. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Palmer, can I chat with you for 1 second?